everyone, and welcome to the Darkest Hour. I'm your host, Amanda Jane. Tonight signifies the conclusion of one chapter and the commencement of another. Bid farewell to Season 7 and welcome Season 8 with open arms. We filled this last season with many never-before-heard stories. Stories that breathed life for the first time right here. It's only right that we continue along this exciting path for the new season. So I've asked you all, what types of stories do you want to hear, and what are your favorites? I'm confident each of you will be pleased with what's to come. I'd also like to express our gratitude for your support and appreciation for the content that we create. Your encouragement is what motivates us to continue on this journey. We're incredibly thankful to each and every one of your contributions. With your help, we've been able to share something truly spooky and unstoppable. So, let's get started, shall we? This happened to me January 2015. I didn't even know what a black-eyed kid was at the time. I'd always been a night owl, into playing video games, surfing the net, and reading books well into the night. At the time, we were living in a 3-plex condo in the center unit. All of them were 2-story, a few miles outside of town, and sheltered in isolation just off an old highway. So, it would have been really difficult for somebody to walk that far down to our development and know whose porch to approach. It was about 2 a.m. It'd been storming big time on the Oregon coast that night. The winds whipping through the area, and we'd had sideways rain going on for days. I was sitting in my room with a little stained glass lamp on, and that wasn't much brighter than a nightlight. I was also burning a candle. The house was perfectly quiet and appeared to be asleep, except for me. That's when I began to hear our front screen door creaking. It sounded like it was being slowly and carefully opened. Whoever was out there at that time of night, in those conditions, seemed to know about the squeaky door and was trying to open it as quickly as possible, about an inch at a time. I kept listening for the sound, making sure it wasn't the wind, but I kept hearing a little hinge creak and then another creak until it was obvious that it was very deliberate. Whoever was doing this knew exactly what they were doing, and for whatever reason, chose not to ring the illuminated doorbell right next to the front door. All of this was going through my mind in rapid, terrifying detail, freaking me out to the real threat that I was about to be confronted by a very bold intruder. I breezed around the corner of my room, which was on the bottom floor, closest to the front porch, and I made my way towards the door. I didn't know what to expect, but I knew somebody was definitely out there. My husband at the time was sleeping upstairs, probably passed out cold. He was a doctor who was always on call, kept long hours, so I hesitated to wake him or get the police involved until I knew for sure what to report. I stood silently in front of the door, armed with my phone and a baseball bat, waiting to see what, if anything, would happen next. Roughly 2 minutes later, I saw the front doorknob being turned slowly, like someone was trying to manipulate the door open. It was locked, but since whoever was out there had taken the time to quietly get that far, I felt fairly confident that they were about to take it much further. The old front door we had at the time didn't have a peephole. It just had this little bit of glass over the top of it that only a 7-foot-tall person could see through. My only alternative was to look through a side 3-foot long by 6-inch narrow window, just adjacent to the door. I kept the lights off and slowly tried to move the little curtain, just enough to peek out onto the porch. As soon as I did, I was shocked to see a figure cloaked in a hoodie staring straight back at me. I was overcome with a feeling of dread and panic. At that point, I flipped on all the lights inside the house and yelled through the front door, "Who are you? What do you want?" There was no answer. I repeated myself and asked, "Are you injured, or is there someone I can call for you?" By then, it was at least 2:30 in the morning. There was still no response, so I ran around quickly and made sure the windows and back doors were locked. I also went to the top of the stairs to look out the hallway window to the parking area. I wanted to see if there were any cars or other figures hiding out in the darkness. I couldn't see anything unusual anywhere. I ran back down to the front door and yelled, "I'm calling the police now." Finally, I heard what sounded like a woman in a monotone voice say, "I need you to open the door and let me in." I was dumbfounded and choking on fear, but I asked her why, what was wrong, and if she needed me to make a call for her. I asked if she was hurt, but I got no reply. So I informed her that my husband was home and sleeping upstairs. I told her I would wake him up and started yelling for him. She interrupts my shouts with a cryptic, robotic reply. "I'm not hurt. I need to come inside. I have something to give you." I was flipping out of my mind by now, but I pulled the curtains all the way back on the side window, turned on the front porch light, and asked her to show me through the glass. She turned around and I could see that she was holding this perfectly groomed, long-haired Pomeranian. It was wearing some gold medallion collar, a fancy one that had the dog's name engraved on the front. Even through the glass, I could see that the address wasn't mine. She must have known that. At that point, she said to me, "I'm here to give you back your dog. Let me in. I'll give him back to you." I snapped back, "That's not my dog, lady. Look at his collar. My dog's right here." And both of them were sitting right beside me, standing guard, but keeping strangely silent. She said again in her creepy way, "I just want to give you your dog back." It felt like I was in the Twilight Zone on steroids. I said, "Look at the dog's tag. Where did you find this dog? Look at the address. It's not my dog, but I'll make a phone call to its rightful owner if you tell me the number on the tag." I was becoming more concerned about the dog, being a devoted dog lover, and the fact that this disturbing person wasn't actually its owner. She didn't move, and I noticed the dog she was carrying was being unusually still as well. It wasn't acting upset, anxious, trying to get away from her. It didn't make sense. It was the most peculiar situation I'd ever seen, but the feeling was ominous and dark. I started looking carefully at this woman so that I could give the details to police, in case she took off with the dog. I could see that she was a thin, younger woman, possibly a late teenage girl. She had straight, dark hair, covered by a red hoodie she was wearing, and a pair of dark jeans. It was impossible to see her eyes. I reached into a nearby coat closet for a flashlight. Just then she said, "If you would just open the door and take a look at the dog to make sure it's not yours, I'll leave." I grabbed a knife from the kitchen, held my phone tightly, and walked towards the door. My dogs never moved. I figured I'd take a close look and slam the door if I had to. I figured if she was unarmed, I might have a chance of grabbing the dog and getting it to its rightful owner. So I said to her, "I've got my phone. I'm ready to call the police if you try anything. Can you just step back from the door and I'll take a look at the dog?" I pulled the front door open slowly and took a long, careful look. The dog appeared to be exceptional and perfect. like it had just come from winning a prize at the AKC dog show. It was obviously someone's prized pet, not just a stray that she'd found, or one that I'd seen around before. I told her it wasn't mine, again. As I did, she took one step towards the door, and I noticed she was holding something in her left hand behind her back, while her other hand was supporting the weight of the dog. She kept looking down at her feet and remained silent. I asked her to put the dog down. As I said that, she glanced back towards the road and the parking area, but I didn't see anyone or any cars there. I asked her again to put the dog down and to leave the front porch area. I said I would let the dog in as soon as she did, and then I'd get it back to its rightful owner. At that point, she looked up at me and seemed to stare right through me with her cold, dead, penetrating eyes. I've never seen anything more bizarre in my life. Her eyes were jet black, her hollow stare fixated on me, like I was being examined or called to some kind of challenge. My hands were trembling, and it was all I could do not to throw up. She didn't seem drunk or on drugs of any kind. She seemed surreal, and in my mind, I kept thinking of the Grim Reaper. I was hearing the words to the Lord's Prayer and struggling not to make eye contact with her. There was something very unnatural and menacing about her eyes, her intensity and her odd, calculated, cold behavior. I couldn't figure it out. I shut the door and started screaming for my husband to come downstairs. He finally came down. I yelled to him, "Hurry! There's somebody standing on the front porch. She's got someone else's dog, keeps saying it's mine. I think she's carrying something behind her back. There's something very wrong with her. Be careful." I called 911 as he opened the front door, but she was already gone. There was no sign of her anywhere. We even got in the car and drove around. The police couldn't find her either, and they couldn't find any reports on a missing woman or a missing dog anywhere in the state. The incident haunted me, so I decided to research lost pets with the description, any reports of women or girls like her in the area that might have been reported or listed nationwide, but I couldn't find anything. Curiously, the only thing that kept coming up was a new sighting of the so-called black-eyed kids in the Portland, Oregon, or northern coastal area where I was living at the time. I'd never heard of anything like that, but when I saw the pictures that other people had posted, read some of the stories, similar reports, my heart froze. She looked exactly like that. The eyes, especially. I don't know what else I could tell you, but I'll never forget it. I'm not sure what her purpose was, though, but I feel like she targeted me because of the fact that I was isolated, known for having my dogs with me everywhere. I would do anything to protect a dog or a helpless animal. Somehow I think she knew that, but it'll always be a creepy mystery. Have I ever gone missing with lost time? I have. I had been living in the infamous Blue House for 3 years. Prior to moving, our family had just experienced a new brush with death from CO2 poisoning in the home. The home was clocked at lethal levels. The fire investigator never could find the cause, meaning there was no official leak. To this day, it's still listed as a paranormal event with the city police and fire department. So we decided it was time to move out after that event. We'd moved everything over to a new home, and I was at the Blue House cleaning it for the new owner. There was a knock at the door. I went to look, but no one was there. As I was walking away from the door, I suddenly felt like the wind was knocked out of me. I rushed towards my bedroom where my purse was to get my rescue inhaler, but I never made it. That's the last thing I remember. When I woke up, I was falling from a standing position, slamming into the wall of the living room at the Blue House. I was colder than I'd ever been in my entire life. I was very disoriented with the furnishings all gone. I didn't know where I was. I went into the bathroom and looked into the mirror. I was so cold my teeth were chattering and my lips were blue. I ran a hot bath, climbed in as quickly as I could. My cell phone had been in my bra and had fallen to the ground when I'd gotten undressed. I retrieved it, called my boyfriend while still in the tub. He answered, and I started crying. "I'm confused. I just woke up and I'm so cold." He said, "Where the hell have you been? You've been missing for over 5 hours. Everyone's so worried." While I was missing for those 5 hours, my boyfriend had checked the Blue House several times, and I was not there. It's unknown to this day where I went or what I did in those 5 hours. I'm unsure if I ever really want to know. I quit my summer babysitting job this morning. Saturday was my first day with the little girl, and today's Sunday. I feel terrible quitting so suddenly. The family I've been working for recommended me, so I'm pretty positive I just blew my chances babysitting for either of them ever again. Originally, I was scheduled to stay there until the morning with the kids, but I ended up calling Mr. and Mrs. Smith, we'll call them, closer to 3 a.m., begging for them to come home. I needed to get out of there. It was an overwhelming sensation that had been lingering since I pulled into the driveway. As much as I tried to blame the feeling on first day jitters, nothing could prepare me for how quickly my anxiety would spike being there. The children were 3 and 5. Let's name them Jack and Jill. The kids were watching Bluey in the living room after dinner, and I was cleaning up. The living room was within sight of the kitchen sink. After I started the dishwasher, I walked out into the living room and saw that Jack had fallen asleep on the couch and Jill had gone upstairs to play in their bedroom. Jack wasn't big for his age, so instead of waking him up, I was able to just pick him up off the couch and carry him to bed. The second floor is a wide hallway with a mirror at the end of the hall, facing back. There's a bathroom and bedrooms on either side. I can see the kid's door is open, and I can hear Jill giggling at what sounds like another person giggling with her. Their bedroom didn't have a TV, but I thought Jill may have had a radio or a Nintendo, something that she was playing with. Before opening the door, I tried peeking into the opening to see if I could find where the other voice was coming from, but the gap didn't let me see much. But what I did see was enough to scare the hell out of me. Jill had long, straight hair, and it looked like static electricity was keeping it up floating. That's the best way I could describe it. With Jack now resting over my shoulder, I supported him with one arm and fully opened the door with my other. Jill was playing on the ground with her dolls. When she looked up at me, all of her hair fell back down to normal. The siblings have an expensive wooden bunk bed at the far end of the room. Making sure not to twist my ankle on the toys, I carried Jack to lay him on the top bunk. When I pulled his resting body from my shoulders and laid him down, I was surprised to see that he was now awake again. His eyes were wide open, and his facial expression looked terrified. I asked him if he was okay. He shook his head yes, but crawled into his blankets and didn't take his head out from under the covers after I tucked him in. While I was doing this with Jack, I felt a push on my lower hip like Jill was getting into the bottom bunk right below, and after I got Jack settled, I leaned down to get her tucked in. But the bed was empty, and Jill was still playing with her dolls behind me. I didn't like that, because what I felt on my hip was clear pressure from cold, small hands. I could feel her individual fingers press against me. The unmistakable feeling of a little one pushing by, but Jill hadn't moved. It was Saturday night, and the parents didn't specify a bedtime for the kids. I asked if Jill needed anything, but when she said no, I got out of that room as fast as possible, went down the stairs to clean up the house before I made a bed for myself on the couch. Cheerios were everywhere. I could have filled a whole new bowl and reserved it for the morning with how many I found. After every last one was found and dispersed of, I was finally able to settle down and watch some TV. The calm was short-lived, though. Another noise had me on my feet again, when from behind me, I heard the sound of a child running in the hallway, upstairs, toward the stairs. I'm expecting to hear "Miss Amy" any second, so I haven't really turned around yet to address whichever child's coming. I'm watching the show on TV, waiting for them to interrupt, but instead, I hear the feet hit the ground with a loud bound in between steps. As soon as the pattering stopped, there was a crash onto the floor that shook the floor under me. I thought, oh my gosh, one of the kids just tried to jump down the staircase. There's a wall that separates the hallway stairs and the living room. It forces me to hop on my feet, turn around the corner from the couch to look. When I flip on the hall light, I'm relieved to see that nobody's hurt themselves, but I'm highly freaked out as to what I just heard. As I'm looking down the hallway, I can see most of the way up to the upstairs hallway as well. Jill walks out of her bedroom to the top of the stairs and sees me standing there. I ask her if she heard that loud noise, and she nods her head yes. So I ask if she knew what it was, and she nods her head again. "It's Hannah." "Who's Hannah?" "She's my sister," Jill says. I ask, "Hannah made that loud noise down here. How did she do that?" "Hannah jumped from here to down there." She then goes on to tell me that her sister keeps asking Jill to jump with her, but she's too afraid. The whole time she's telling me this, I see the light from the bedroom door behind her change size, like the door was opening and closing in the dark hallway. I'm still paying attention to Jill, thinking the sound also woke up Jack, and I'm going to see him come out to join his sister any minute. But after her explanation for the noise we heard, Jill turned around and went back into the bedroom. She then closed the door behind her. The upstairs hallway was completely dark again. I turned off the downstairs light and got back on the couch. Around the living room, there's a bunch of family pictures of the Smith family. Most of them were recent, but lots of baby pictures. Jack is a newborn and Jack has brown hair and Jill has blonde. It was easy to tell which baby photo belonged to who. In maybe 2 of these photos in the corner of the living room, there's a baby Jill in the picture with another older blonde girl that looks almost identical to Jill now. Could that have been Hannah? I thought. These grainy, somewhat old photos gave me goosebumps, so instead of staring at them all night as I tried to sleep, I turned on the TV and was happy to discover that Nick at Night was playing episodes of Friends, and eventually I would doze off watching the show with the volume down low. The next time I woke up, it was because the living room was freezing and the blanket I'd fallen asleep with was nowhere to be found. The TV was off. It could have been set on an automatic timer that I was unaware of, but the DVD player under it was blinking numbers like the power had recently gone out and come back on. There was another small radio clock on one of the shelves next to the TV that was also blinking to be reset. I used the remote to turn the TV back on, and Friends began quietly playing again while I stood up in search of my blanket. It was cold enough to see the air I breathed by the time I got to the thermostat, which was located across the room. The space around me was warm again. The thermostat was also reading at a normal temperature. I turned on the living room light and what I saw next to the entryway made me nearly faint. My blanket had been draped over the coat rack, and for a moment, I thought a huge, dark, 7-foot-tall creature was standing next to the door. It took me a few seconds to figure out what I was looking at, and when I did, I noticed the blanket didn't fully reach the floor, and under it, I saw 2 little feet poking out the bottom, and this time, I knew Jill was trying to trick me. Not wanting to knock the coat rack off balance and possibly have it fall on her, I gently grabbed the blanket with 2 hands and tried to lift it over with a little fluff. The blanket drops, losing its shape, and there's no Jill hiding in the coat rack. Take this how you will, but when the blanket dropped, the coat rack was a lot smaller than what I had pulled the blanket from. When I first noticed my blanket draped over it, I thought I would have noticed something that tall by the front door. When I looked down and didn't see Jill, it felt like my tummy was filled with rocks. There's just no way she would have been able to run away, hide completely like that. She's 5. I just stood there with my blanket, listening to the sounds of Jill still playing upstairs in her room. I didn't care how late it was. I was relieved to hear someone else was awake in the house, and after the coat rack thing that I'd just seen, I didn't want to be downstairs alone. I flipped on all the lights that I could before my ascent. When I went into the kitchen, the microwave timer said that it was 2:52, and so did the oven timer. It was only the living room that lost power in the house. When I'm at the top of the stairs, the hallway in front of me is dark, aside from the light under the children's door. I can still hear Jill's voice giggling, and clearly a shadow moving back and forth. I could see it under the doorway, blocking out the light when it passed. Turning on the hall light, I started heading towards the door. I gave 2 little taps with my knuckle before opening the door. The room was dark, and both of the children sound asleep. It was freezing in there, like when I woke up. The same weird bubble of cold I'd stepped out of by the couch downstairs. It felt like I'd stepped through a wall of stagnant, cold air. Outside the room, it was warm. I quietly stepped back out and closed the door, glancing into the big mirror that faced the hallway. There was something different about the reflection. The upstairs bathroom is directly across from the kids' room. I can partially see both in the reflection. I can see a little past the handle of the bathroom door, but the bathroom door on my side is fully open. I look again into the mirror. I can't begin to understand how the door could be closed in the reflection. I frantically scan around the mirror for any other inaccuracies, but it's only the door that looks wrong. Then I tried standing in different positions in the hallway while staring at the reflection of the closed door. Nowhere I stood could give me the correct view of what the door actually looked like. I'm at a loss for any explanation, and then it makes the slightest movement, and in the reflection to my right, the bathroom door opens a few inches. Still, nothing was happening on my side of the mirror, but I ran my reflection away from that door and back down the stairs. And that's when I called the parents, multiple times. Surely I scared them or worried them, but you know what? I was terrified. Still am, technically. Had I not quit, after this, I'm sure they would have fired me anyway. They were completely unimpressed by me and rather bitter about cutting their trip short. Though, personally, I think that they should be a little bit more concerned with the potential demons or ghosts living in their home. You know, specifically the one that keeps trying to convince their daughter to jump from the 2nd story. But hey, I'm just the babysitter. They're the parents. What do I know? Not my problem anymore, I guess. I'm recalling the time I received a phone call from a former coworker. He started telling me his sister was missing for over a week. He was desperate and remembered that I was a PI. He told me that he wanted to hire me, so I agreed. Me and my partner. He signed a retainer, we gathered all the critical information that we needed, and started. We were dealing with a young woman in her early 20s, pregnant, already missing for a week. His reason for hiring us is that he felt the police were moving too slow. I explained to him that as private investigators, we needed to contact the police department so they would know we were out there looking, asking questions, interviewing individuals who have seen or spoken to her. Perhaps people they may have interviewed or have their eyes on as a person of interest. We explained to him that missing can turn into something else, and respectfully, we didn't want to get in the way of the police department's case. We did agree to join the search party. We discreetly did so. We didn't want anyone knowing that we were part of the investigation for obvious reasons. Only the family knew. Of course, there was a high concern to find her. One thing about a missing person, one that's been missing for a week, they could be anywhere. We helped in looking everywhere. False leads, false sightings. We posted pictures of her all over the place. There were plenty of people. Some were even professionally trained to search for people missing in the wooded areas, and plenty of regular people who just wanted to be helpful. Throughout all of the searches, we kept in close contact with the family and the police department. We knew, again, that anything can change, take on a criminal nature at any time. And that's exactly what happened. After several weeks into the search, my coworker's parents called me, told me the police had contacted them, told them their daughter's case was assigned to the homicide division. It was no longer being treated as a missing persons case. Of course, hearing that, we backed off some. The last thing we wanted was to interfere with a homicide investigation, create future problems for ourselves as investigators who work primarily for the private sector. So unless they requested our assistance, we just sort of waited. Sadly, 3 days after that call, her body was discovered by people walking their dog in a wooded area of a park, partially decomposed and partially buried. It wasn't a place that we had been part of searching, but apparently it was an area that was part of the search. It was so sad for the family experiencing such a tremendous loss. That feeling of not knowing, the days and then weeks pass. As each day passes beyond that, you try to stay positive, but deep down in your gut, you are feeling this dread because you've explored her room, combed over all of her belongings, family things, personal things, the last conversations with people who knew her, who may have seen her. You kind of conclude from all of what you've gathered, she doesn't fit the type that would have just walked away. Then that dreaded feeling and voice again rising up from your gut, telling you she's gone. So that's what happened. And they did catch the guy. They casted their net, located and traced the killer via CTV cameras. Cameras. I can't speak enough of these. It turned out to be some new guy that she'd met, someone the family didn't know about. He was tried, convicted, sentenced to 20+ years. Not enough time, but more than most monsters get where I'm from. An eerie side note that came about after all of this was that during the search party, they'd even posted one of her pictures on a telephone pole right in front of the killer's house. When a person goes missing, sometimes they just seem to vanish into thin air. You exhaust all your avenues doing your darndest to find them. It feels like you're chasing a ghost that doesn't want to be seen or heard. But sometimes there is someone that knows and has all the details because they were there and they may have caused this person to vanish. In the end, I guess I'm just glad the family didn't have to go on wondering. They got the closure that they deserved. But really, they all deserved so much better. On my 14th birthday, I got an electric mountain bike as a gift from my uncle. Its intended purpose was to be my means of transportation for school, so I didn't have to take the stinky bus anymore. That was its intended purpose. What I really used it for was taking it up the hills with the older boys that rode actual motorbikes. My electric bike wasn't nearly as powerful as theirs and couldn't get enough speed to do tricks, so I basically used it as a chair while watching the other kids drive around the woods. One day, I got a healthy helping of peer pressure that leads me to the peak of a hill, trying to line my tires with a thin walking trail in between two tree trunks wider than my wingspan. At the top of the hill, there's a small, flat patch that I'm supposed to do a circle in to already have momentum when I hit the hill. Well, that plan didn't happen, though. I hit the throttle too fast on my turn, and I launched myself off the back of the mountain like a fucking cartoon character. The backside of the hill isn't like the front trail I was aiming for. The back is just a long drop into trees. And down those trees to the forest floor, several feet down from the trail. By the way, I'm not a guy, I'm not a bro, and the only reason I was up there was because I had a crush on one of the motorbike boys. I thought if I dressed cute and hung out there long enough, he would think that I'm way cooler than these dumb bikes. So, zoom, here I go off a fucking cliff. Before a tree branch bonked my lights out, I remember my last thoughts were, I'm gonna die now. What a lame way to go. At least they didn't see me fall. Teenagers. When I regained consciousness, I was high up in a tree and pretty fucking banged up. I knew I'd broken more than a few ribs. My arms and legs were cut up all to hell, but they still worked. The helmet I'd worn without a chin strap was gone, and the bugs, they were crawling in my hair. It's also now starting to get dark in the forest. I don't know how long I was out, but I do know the sun was nowhere near the horizon when I started. The forest was alive with woodland noise, but no human noises, no motorbikes or voices, no one calling my name trying to find me. In any other circumstances, the atmosphere would have been a yoga dream. Distant birds chirping, insects flying around, some tangled in my hair so I could hear their wings flap in HD. I wish I could have enjoyed it more. But the blinding pain in my ribs and horrible fear of falling to my death any second, I guess I should say fear of finishing my fall, kept my mind a little occupied from enjoying the view. From my perspective, the view I saw was nauseating. Panic and disgust were induced from knowing that I would have to somehow scale my ass down this tree. I've never climbed a tree up to this point. I didn't climb this one. I had no clue how to get down or what I was going to do. Where's my phone? Gone. Where's my DC slip-on shoes? Gone. They slipped off. It was brutal, crawling down one branch at a time. I'd slowly move my weight from branch to branch, making sure they could support my weight. I didn't know that would have been the easy part of my escape from the tree. Halfway down, the branches just stop. These kind of trees decided not to grow branches past a certain point, so I didn't have many other options but to grip the tree best I could, like a giant fire pole, and try to slide down. That worked for a few feet. I'd get a bunch more big cuts, several splinters, and some sort of friction burn on my cheek and forehead. Then, my crescent hold lost its tightness, and I fell at a diagonal angle backwards the rest of the way down. As I crash-landed on the forest floor with a massive thud, an electric surge of pain jolted through my body like a lightning bolt. The impact aggravated my already fractured ribs, so now gasping for breath was added to my list. The noises in the forest grew louder, reverberating through the towering trees, and then quieting down entirely, then back to a symphonic forest melody, over and over again. I knew something was wrong, aware of the urgency to secure some sort of safety. I battled with my weak and seriously bruised physique, summoning every drop of strength that remained in my slowly emptying tank. Weakly, I hoisted myself up, relying on the sturdy support of another nearby tree. Everything hurt, but at least my legs weren't broken. The darkness of the night had now engulfed the forest entirely. Each rustle of leaves or distant hoot of an owl, everything was scaring me suddenly, especially the thought that I might die out here. I had no idea where I was exactly, or what was going on with my head, my body. I persevered through that pain, but I realized I was only getting myself deeper into the labyrinth of the woods. The forest seemed to enclose around me, while the wind was relentless. Just as I started to lose some hope, a voice inside me told me I couldn't stop. It wasn't a real voice, just a strong feeling. But then, just a short time later, I could hear a voice in the distance. Finally, someone was saying my name. As I stumbled through the undergrowth, it almost felt like I was drunk. My steps were uneven, my breathing labored, but if I could just make it to the voice, I knew I'd be okay. I saw a flicker of light. It caught my attention due to the total darkness surrounding me. I pursued this little faint glow, hoping it was leading me out of the woods and not further into it. Then, I heard the voice again. It was only the second time I realized I didn't recognize the voice. It certainly didn't belong to any of the boys that I'd come with. It was a woman's voice. The unsettling noises of the forest gradually fade into the background, and I fixate on the beacon of light in the voice calling my name. Then, suddenly, everything went dark. I could feel myself falling, and then I could feel someone catch me. This time when I woke up, I was in a petite clearing. There was light again, but this was different than the guiding light that was just in front of me before I ended up in the clearing. This light was coming from the moon, which to my surprise, I could see now. The moon's glow was somehow illuminating a path I actually recognized, one that led to a popular road. I was in heaping pain, but still, relief washed over me, knowing that any form of civilization was finally within reach. Fueled by determination and a little bit of spite for being left here to begin with, I pressed on. Finally, I reached the road, and a car materialized in the distance, its headlights cutting through the darkness. Suddenly, my distrust for strangers disintegrated, and I was frantically waving my arms. Thankfully, I captured the attention of the driver, who after pulling over immediately rushed to my aid. Finally safe, I slumped into the arms of a total stranger, overwhelmed with gratitude for their kindness and the opportunity to escape that forest. It felt like the forest had tested me that day, physically, mentally, yet I also totally believe that it helped me. I don't know how I got to that clearing, who caught me, but also whose voice was guiding me. Some things just can't be explained, I guess. As for the motocross boys and my crush, well, it turns out it wasn't as malicious as I thought. They all waited for me to come down the hill and into view. I just never did. They went back up the hill to look for me, eventually. But since I'd literally fallen off the trail and was completely out of view, they all assumed I had chickened out and went home to save myself the embarrassment. None of them knew I was missing or injured. So, without that voice, I don't know where I'd be right now, but I bet it's a lot worse off. I joke nowadays that Mother Nature herself saved me. I guess I'm only half joking, though. Reality is, I'll never know, but I'm forever grateful. Well, friends, it appears we've reached the end of Season 7. Thanks for joining me tonight. Whether it's your first time or you're a regular, your support means the world over here. We've got brand new episodes every Friday night. Keep those eyes open for those deep sleep videos. And of course, double features. Subscribe, tap the bell, and you'll never miss a thing. Big thanks to those who shared their stories, and a huge shout out to all of our patrons, whom we appreciate so very much. Tracy S, Tamara K, Monica L, ZoeWatt, Chelle B, Donald C, The Dark Cosmos, Marion T, Rat Girl, Alisha S, Erin G, Nikki H, Mr. Revenant, Naz K, Brendon G, Paul T, Nicholas C, Lissane, Arlene F, Adrienne, and TF Parham. If you want to support The Darkest Hour in other ways, consider joining our Patreon, patreon.com/thedarkesthour, or click the link in the description to learn more. Do you have stories like these? I'd love to share them. Send them to me, amandadarkesthour@gmail.com, or on the Darkest Hour subreddit, The Darkest Hour YT. Stay spooky.